First, we don't get on TV too often, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Damon Mcquaid. I've been on the Historic Commission for about 3 years now. I've lived in Lunenburg all my life. Also a member of the Building Reuse Committee and a member of the Planning Board, too. So I'm try to get involved in everything I can in town, but we have 3 other members on the board and hoping to get a 5th member soon, but I'll let Amory introduce herself.
Amory Phelps. I've been on the Historical Commission for about 2.5 years. I'm also representing the Historical Commission on the Building Reuse Committee.
I'm Rebecca Lantry, and I'm the acting chairman of the Historical Commission. I've been on the Historical Commission since the 1630 house went down, and I can't even remember how long that's been, but that's about it.
I'm Richard McGraw. I've been on the commission about 10 or 11 years.
So what we're going to do here tonight is I have a presentation to put on about the history of the town center and how it's changed over the years. So I'm going to give that presentation, then afterwards we'll open it up for questions, comment. If any of you want to share a memory of the town center or correct me on any of my facts, but you're welcome to do so. So we'll get straight to the presentation and so the reason that we're here is over the past year, the Lunenburg Planning Board has been laying the groundwork to start a discussion about creating a village district zoning bylaw in town. And as part of that groundwork, the Historic Commission is holding this visioning session with the goal of reaching a common understanding of the history of Lunenburg Town Center in an effort to provide a solid foundation moving forward as the Planning Board prepares to draft the village district bylaw. The intent of this exercise tonight is not really to discuss the future of the town center, but to first discuss its past so we can better understand who we are as a community moving forward. And a lot of this also comes from the Building Reuse Committee that I serve on, and looking at the municipal buildings in town that are underused, unoccupied, and that committee looks to make recommendations to the selectmen about how we can better use those buildings, get them occupied and more useful, more apt to be preserved. So one of the big issues with that is that this town center itself is all zoned residential, so that is why the planning board is looking at this bylaw to make it feasible to work on those buildings. But I can talk more about that later, answer questions that you have. I'll jump into the history part of things now. So here's just a satellite image of the town center. We have some of the landmarks on there, the teen center, sitting on Main Street that runs across the top portion of the screen. You have Mass Ave cutting east to west, and Lancaster and Leominster roads down at the bottom of the screen. Now, a lot of the research that I did here, which I had a great amount of help from the Historic Society on, kind of circled around this map you see on the right side of the screen from 1856. It's part of a bigger map that actually showed all the buildings in Lunenburg, but this is just a blow-up of the center of town. And you can see from the map on the left, present-day map, at least the roads anyways, haven't really changed that much. If we zoom in, again, you see Main Street at the top of your screen, Mass Ave going left to right, and Lancaster and Leominster roads below. To start our tour here, we'll focus on that red dot, which is labeled a church. That is actually this building that we're sitting in now, the town hall. It wasn't always a town hall, and if you kind of look at that map closely, that's a little bit of a different location than it's in now too. You notice a store and post office further up Main Street from where we are now, which is kind of the opposite relationship that this building has with the market now. Originally, being a church, it was called the Third Church. It was dedicated on Christmas Day, 1830. Within a few years of the dedication of the church, there were some issues as far as leadership and how people wanted to worship. So it was a rocky start for the church. And by 1867, the congregation kind of went its separate ways, and the church was deeded to the town of Lunenburg. In September of that year, the building was moved about 200 feet north of its original spot and raised an additional 12 feet to accommodate a second floor. So that top image shows the church in its original location, and if you look at that sliver of building on the right side of the screen, that's actually the back corner of the United Parish. If you notice that little detail on the top right of the screen, it's actually still virtually the same today as it was in that drawing from late 1800s. So just a comparison of then and now, you notice the building is taller. They changed the clock tower, but the basic portions of the building are the same. A lot of the same details can be seen carried through. So now we'll move over to another building that you might recognize. This is the Headland Market in its original state. Built in 1867 by Daniel Putnam, this was actually the second market to occupy that same location. So the market you were seeing in the map is actually not this building. The history book that I did most of my research out of, the History of Lunenburg, calls this the Timothy Snow House was the market that was there before, that was moved to 27 Main Street, which is no longer there, but I'll get into it a little bit later. But this is Daniel Putnam's market, the second market. That barn that you see behind here is actually, again, the second barn. The original one was moved and reused to 876 Mass Ave at the time of the conversion. So again, here's another then and now comparison of that market. You can see someone has added a second floor porch to it, and looks quite different than it does now, but some of the main features, the roof line, the windows are the same. The store had a succession of different proprietors over the years. It was sold to Warren Lewis in 1887. Carl Brown then bought it in 1915. The post office used to be in this building. He was the postmaster for a number of years. Mr. Brown's son, Earl, clerked at the store and later followed his father's footsteps and became postmaster too. Finally, in 1959, the post office moved out of this building to a spot further north on Main Street, which kind of made it tough for the market, I guess it seems, because there wasn't so much traffic in there. The building was vacant for a while before George Shaft moved his pharmacy into there, and again was vacant for several years before Richard Fuller, who ran the Lunenburg Apothecary out of the space, moved in. He later moved his business to 943 Mass Ave, but the building sat vacant again after his business left. Up until 1976, when they built this village complex that exists today, and Honey Farms took it over. The Lunenburg history book itself was written in 1976, and it actually calls the redevelopment of the area and Honey Farms taking it over a great improvement over the appearance of the center. Here are two more images, same building, just different iterations of its life, 1915 and 1960, as Shaft's Pharmacy. And here are some interior shots of the building, the top one being the post office boxes from its days as a post office. This is probably in the 1940s. And the picture below, that's Earl Brown and Chet Page in the interior of the market. Now, I mentioned that 27 Main Street that used to occupy the spot there. I believe from what research I've done that this is that building sitting next to the town hall, also probably shifted about 200 feet. Again, you can see it pictured next to Andrews Hall there. So now we'll jump across the street and talk about the Ritter Building. Again, here in 1856, owned by David Putnam. So here's another comparison shot of then and now. The top one being a building called the Revere House, which was built in 1780, stood where the Ritter Building now stands. The building operated one of the first taverns in town until 1872, when its operation was changed to that of an inn. In 1900, the building was torn down, and in 1903, the property was sold to the town of Lunenburg. As a point of reference, you can notice the same building in the background. This is 2 Leominster Road in both images. So essentially, that building is in the same location as the Ritter Building. This is an image of the dedication ceremony for the Ritter Building. It was held on a festival in town called Old Homes Day. That was on August 3rd, 1910. A local builder and architect, Alphaeus K. Francis, was hired to build the library, but due to his untimely death, it was completed by his son, Sidney H. Francis, also a prominent builder in town. This was not the first library in town. It didn't take us till 1910 to have one. There were private libraries from 1792 on. So they were private organizations that people paid dues to rent the books from them. This went on until the 1850s, when a law was passed by the Massachusetts government that allowed towns to levy a tax on the citizens to pay for a library that was free to all its citizens. And that bill was actually signed into law by our 20th governor, George S. Botwell, who grew up in Lunenburg. He grew up on his family farm and attended Lunenburg Public School to the age of 17, which is a long academic career for back then. But so because of this relationship with the governor, probably, Lunenburg was the 3rd town in the whole state to take advantage of the program of taxing the people to have a public library. Originally, the book collection, which came from consolidating all these private libraries in town along with some other donations, was held in a building located where this building, the town hall, is now. Then the collection was moved to the Eagle House, then back to the new town hall in 1867 when it was built, or moved, I should say, and then again over here in 1910. So here's a picture of the library now. You can see that someone's added shutters to it, and what breaks my heart the most is in 1963, when they added the children's wing to it, they painted the beautiful brownstone and brick all white, so you lose all the detail that was in the building. Here's just another nice view from the 40s to compare our town center. You can see a lot less landscaping there. It's kind of open. People actually parked perpendicularly to the street, not parallel like now. So a lot more open back then. And you can see the market with the closed-in double porches on there. So we'll move along now and stand in the essentially front lawn of the United Parish and look across the common over to School Street. So again, from 1917 to 2014, it's a little bit different, but we'll go back to the comparison between 1890s and 1917. You'll notice this building, highlighted in red, that is the barn behind the Revere House that I just talked about, where the Ritter Library used to be. It's still there in 1890. This building in the center is the Center School, originally built in 1892. If you compare between those two images, the building actually got a little bit taller. In 1908, they jacked the whole building up and added a first floor to it to accommodate the influx of students. And if you notice, this building to the left popped up in between there too. This was originally the number 2 schoolhouse, located all the way down at the intersection of Goodrich Street and Lancaster Ave. They picked the building up and carted it all the way up to the center of town to be used as the first fire station. Pictured above is that very same schoolhouse, which they also jacked up and added some garage bays underneath it so they could integrate the fire station and police in there. And looking down at the map at the bottom of the screen, the third iteration of the building, this original structure was still in place, and they added onto the front of it to give you the building that you may remember being there, built in 1976, I believe, this edition. And don't recall the demolition date, but you can see it now as a vacant lot with the Verizon building behind it. So now we'll walk down School Street, essentially stand next to the old high school, primary building, annex building, whatever you want to call it, and look back towards the center of town at this center school that I mentioned. You can, again, built in 1892. It's located pretty much where the Historic Society building is today. And you can actually see, as a reference, the Francis House sitting in the same spot. As we turn around and look at the old high school, it's a little more overgrown than it was back then, but this is, when it first opened up is the top picture, and today at the bottom is tough on this screen. If you notice that top image and look at the arched window in the center, you can actually see light in that window. As part of my research about the history of the town, I uncovered some of the original blueprints for that building, and it wasn't always a closed-in gymnasium like if you've been in there recently, or even when I attended kindergarten there, it was closed up. Originally, it was quite a beautiful thing. That was an open auditorium, so when you walked in that front door, all you could see was a double-height space with light beaming through, and it really looked like a gorgeous building back in the day. Here are some images of the construction of that building. Digging the foundations with the horses and moving earth by hand. Now we'll go back to Mass Ave and talk about where the village complex is located now. Here's an aerial view from the 1950s approximately. And this is the area where the village complex is. And used to be, at one point, a stand operated by Harold Harley until about the 1960s. They sold ice cream and burgers, and was quite the spot for the kids after school, and a place to gather, really. And previous to that, it was actually a gas station, Lizzie Proctor's filling station. So that top image is actually, if you were standing at the intersection of Mass Ave and Main Street there, essentially on the front lawn of the Ritter, looking towards the village complex, that's what you would have seen. Kind of a wasteland at that point, really, just a gas station, hardly anything in the center of town, but it's changed a lot since then. We'll move down the line here next door to what's labeled on this map as the town hall. Like I mentioned, when this map was done, the town hall was a church, and here it is a building that's no longer here. It was actually moved up to become the barn of the Jones house, so another building that had been repurposed and reused. Later down the line, built about 1926, I believe, was another store that stands where the credit union is today. That's another comparison shot. Over the years, it held Bickford's Market, Peterson's Market, the Apothecary, I think, for a while, also the Red and White Market, the Lunenburg Variety Store. If we move down the street just a little bit more, these three buildings, actually, there's not that much information that I found on them, but if you note on here, you have a shoe shop, a carriage shop, and the third dot there is what I believe to be 935 Mass Ave, the Tyler House, which the book goes into detail about what was there, but not where it was really, because I think it still existed in 1976. So these are some photos of that area, 1948, 1958. There's a series of buildings that are no longer there. I believe it's the one on the left, possibly, that was this 935 Mass Ave. Anyways, it was built around 1840. The house was used as a shop for the manufacture of straw hats. Straw hats were heated up in a giant cast iron vat in the basement, and the straw was made pliable, and they wove them, and They mostly made farmer-style, wide-brim hats for working in the fields, but they also made some stovetop hats there as well. Next door to that, you see it labeled as a forge on this map. This is actually the location of the abandoned gas station today. Originally, it was Thomas Archibald's blacksmith shop. He also lived at one of our members' house today at 123 Leominster Road. He later in his life moved his shop up there. But again, picturing then and now, you can see the town hall in the background of this image, both images. If we slide down Mass Ave a little bit more, we're off my map now, but essentially across from Marshall Park is this building, 876 Massachusetts Ave, referred to in the history book as the Hildreth House, was moved here in 1868. This was that original barn behind the original store in the center of town. Moved down there by Daniel Putnam, and he actually ran a palm leaf hat business out of this house. What they did back then was women of the village came up, bought the palm leaves from him. They wove them into hats and would bring them back to the store to exchange for other goods that they could use, like shoes for their children, food, etc. The palm leaf hat business was actually kind of a thing in Lunenburg. That Governor Botwell that I'd mentioned before got his start working as a clerk for Simeon Haywood, who had another palm leaf hat shop in town. Now we'll go up to Leominster Road and work our way down there. We'll start at 2 Leominster Road, noted here as the Abercrombie House. This was built between 1835, 1840, and used as a relay house servicing the stagecoach, as where they could exchange their horses for fresh ones, refresh their horses, and service the Revere House, which was next door, the hotel, so people staying there could get their horses taken care of. If we travel further down Leominster Road to 77 Leominster Road, pictured here, the N.F. Cunningham Farmhouse, built in 1757 by a Dr. John Taylor, who operated his practice out of the home. William Cunningham purchased the home in 1889, and he operated a store, another market, out of the west end of the home, and also operated a potash works across the street from the structure. And potash is essentially fertilizer. They boiled ash and got potassium out of it. Further down Leominster Road to 114 Leominster Road, this is the intersection of West Street, essentially. The Lawton Bowels house, circa 1776. From the late 1800s to about the period of World War I, Mr. Bowels, who learned the trade of basket making at the age of 12, carried out the trade both at this site, and later he moved across West Street to 130 Leominster Road, this house, currently the Lantry House, and carried on his basket making operation there. Now if we jump onto the first house in West Street, 8 West Street, pictured here, the Kemp House, built in 1845, was originally built as a steam-powered lumber mill. Eventually it became a house, but at some point in its history they were also manufacturing pewter plates here. Now we'll go to the head of Lancaster Ave and work our way down there. This is 3 Lancaster Ave, referred to a lot as a corner house. Now it's Cornerstone Antiques. Built in 1798 by Colonel Edwin Cushing. He originally conducted a bookbinding and book printing business here that employed, as the history book says, a large number of men. Among the books printed there were Gulliver's Travels and Bibles. In about 1845, Calvin Farnsworth owned the property, and he was manufacturing band boxes. Those are the boxes that held the large ladies' hats of the day. Also, a shoemaking enterprise was there, which flourished in Lunenburg for a time, was carried out in the old bookbinding room of the building. From around 1870 to 1945, the house was owned by the Alphaeus K. Francis family, the builder of the Ritter Library. Convenient that he lived right across the street. And in the 1920s, Lila Francis conducted an antique business, first in a little shop east of the house on Mass Ave, and then later in the house itself. From 1937 to 1947, part of the house served as a telephone switching office. The house was purchased by George Schaff in 1945, and in 1946 his mother opened the Corner House gift shop and restaurant in the building. And one of the neat things that I came across in doing my research was up at the Historic Society, they actually have a menu from the Corner House restaurant. In 1947, Mr. Schaff added his drugstore to the front of the building before he moved it over to the Putnam store that we talked about earlier. Later, he sold the house to Cy Schnur, who I think used it mostly as a residence. And Mr. Schnur sold the building to a Lunenburg Community Federal Credit Union. Since then, it had been, as far as I can remember in my lifetime, Willie's Woolens, Trudy's Treats, and now the Cornerstone Antiques. But if you notice in that top picture, there's a barn behind the building that isn't there any longer. Here you can see it pictured rolling down Mass Ave. And a little ad from the Sentinel by George Jewett, who claims to have the best set of wheels for moving buildings in these parts. But if you notice the kind of the window pattern on that building, it ended up located down behind the Bickford's Market there in the Village Center complex. So that's the barn there. Again, no longer there after the Village complex was built, but it was repurposed for a time. As we continue down Lancaster Ave, we get to 43 Lancaster Ave. Built 1790, the Whiting House. There was a long L in the rear of the house used by Essex Whiting as a workshop. He designed and built custom furniture here, including coffins as well as frames for clocks whose mechanisms were produced in Ashby. After his death, his children inhabited the home. His son, Benjamin, also a cabinet maker, continued on to use the furniture shop where he produced fine furniture for the whole region. If we step across Whiting Street to 53 Lancaster Ave, pictured here, it's a little bit overgrown now, but this house was also used for bookbinding. Interestingly enough, this is the same building, this is a side view showing the long L of the house, which was detached and moved down to 44 Whiting Street, where it exists today as that red home at the bottom of the screen. So that's the portion of the house moved. Again, sliding down Lancaster Road some more, we get to 73 Lancaster Ave, the Cushing House, the second oldest standing house in town, built in 1724. The house was used as a tavern for a long period of history. Now, 1724 was before the town hall was built, and town meetings were originally held in the church. When they weren't held in the church, they were constantly adjourned to the tavern down here. As we continue down Lancaster, we get to 99 Lancaster Ave, referred to as a Cochrane House, built in 1835. There was a Mr. Campbell who lived here who made felt hats out of a shed in the back of the house, as the history book refers to it as being a place where water was abundant. I guess water is necessary for manufacturing felt hats. Continuing down the road a little further to 125 Lancaster Ave, we have what the book refers to as Elmdale, built in 1769. In 1805, the house was bought by Greenough and Sons Printing Company, who operated their bookbinding and printing business out of the house for about 31 years. Among the books printed here were Greenough Bibles, a copy of which resides at the Historic Society building. But what was interesting about this printing operation was that Their company was one of the first in the nation to utilize the technology of stereotype printing. So it was really revolutionized the way things were printed, and it was cutting edge for the time. Now we'll go to a building that's no longer there at approximately 100 Lancaster Ave, noted here on the map as the Academy. This is a picture of the Academy. It wasn't torn down, it was moved all the way to Fitchburg, to the corner of Rollstone and Foster Street, where it still stands today. The building was built originally in 1841, and it housed Lunenburg Academy. At the time, there were 51 male students and 51 female students, which is a pretty good ratio for back then to have equal number of male and female students. And these students came from as far away as Cuba, so quite the popular and revered academy that we had down there. Now, if we jump over to Whiting Street, 53 Whiting Street is what's referred to as the Clifton House, built in 1835. I'm not sure if it was built then or moved then, but originally it was a #1 district schoolhouse. It was moved to this location and became Jimmy Clifton's house. Mr. Clifton operated a glass glazing business out of the home, and later in history there was a bicycle shop that operated out of there. Jumping up to Mass Ave, to where the Brooks House is. The history book says built in 1870, though a building is shown there on my 1856 map, so either it was rebuilt or the book might be a little off, but this is the Brooks House. There used to be a barn behind the building, removed in around 1940, but that barn had been remodeled to be used as a youth hostel to serve bicycle tourists who were passing through town. Also, there was a shed behind the building that was utilized as a slaughterhouse. The building became school property in the 40s. Since then, it's been used as classrooms in times of overcrowding, as well as offices for the school administration and town officials as well. Now we'll move up to the other church called out on this map, the United Parish today. The United Parish Church was originally occupied by the group that called themselves the First Evangelical Congregational Society, who occupied the building for the first time in 1844. Until March 30th of 1975, when the church was rededicated, combining the Congregationalist and the Methodist to have the United Parish Church. Now, if you note the picture to the left, there's kind of a building in the front lawn of that church that's clearly not there anymore. That building was known as the Town Market. Originally occupied by a barber shop, and also had a billiards room in the rear of the building, which is surprising, judging by the fact that the building is that small, but also barber shop and billiards, I guess, go well together. You can see there the building has been picked up and about to be moved to its present location on Holman Street across from the North Cemetery, where for a long time it was used as the Cemetery Commission headquarters. No longer anymore, but it's still there if you drive down Holman Street. And again, if in the top picture there's a building immediately adjacent to that is no longer there. Now we're about where the teen center is today, but that building is actually the Eagle House. So shown here on the map. And you can see from this photo up the top of the screen, sitting in its original location, referred to initially as the Bellows House, built by Colonel Benjamin Bellows in 1740. He was a surveyor, farmer, and very much involved in land speculation. He and his wife had 3 sons, the youngest of which was also Colonel Joseph Bellows, who eventually inherited the family home along with 800 acres of land. In 1784, Joseph Bellows and his family left Lunenburg, and the house was then occupied by a succession of families and used as its occupants by both a grocery store, the public library, and a variety of other uses. In 1875, the Bellows house was purchased by Benjamin Snow of Fitchburg. Snow spent about $3,000 remodeling and furnishing the house as a summer hotel with all kinds of modern improvements, including hot water, cold water, bathtubs, electric bells, and surprisingly, a bowling alley. He was the one who placed the American Eagle weather vane at the top of the building and changed the name to that of the Eagle House. After changing hands through several owners, the house was finally acquired by Arnold C. Dickinson in 1937. Mr. Dickinson had the house moved to its present location and donated the building to the American Legion. Now, Mr. Dickinson is actually also the person who moved the town market that was adjacent to it. This was part of a project that he had in mind to clear the land to build a town center, if you will, a municipal building to hold all the town offices on that site that never quite came to fruition. Here's the Eagle House rolling down Memorial Drive on logs to its new home. And here it sits today. Now we'll move to the Jones House, 42 Main Street. Pictured above, probably late 1800s. And below, just a couple years ago. Since then, the building has been remodeled beautifully. But the house was originally built in 1835, and again, this wasn't the original location of the building. The barn I mentioned before was the old town hall. The rest of the structure was actually a school that sat on the lower common where the gazebo is today. After serving as a school for 5 or 6 years, Major Jones bought and moved the building to the present location. Luther Burbank, a famous horticulturist, lived here from 1872 to 1875. While living here, he developed the Burbank russet potato. It's actually grown approximately where the teen center is today. The Burbank russet potato is the most grown potato in the whole United States and the only potato used by McDonald's to make their French fries. Because of the historic significance of the home, the town purchased the building in 1945 and rented it out to a series of tenants, but being owned by the town, we didn't have much money, or never allocated much money to preserve the building. So recently the building was put out for request for proposal to find a person who would come in and remodel the home and preserve it the way it should be. And you see it sitting in its present state now, looking good as ever. If we keep going down Main Street to the Methodist Church, dedicated May 1st, 1830, the church had its ups and downs with membership over the years. However, by 1904, the building boasted stained glass windows, chandeliers, and a furnace. In March of 1975, the Methodists, like I mentioned before, joined with the Congregationalist and formed a united parish. In 1976, at the time of the history book being written, the building was vacant and they were questioning about what was going to happen to it. Now the building houses some professional offices. Across the street from the Methodist Church is this building, built in 1912 by, again, Sidney Francis, same one who built the library. The building operated as a meat market for a number of years under several different proprietors, and the building is now a dwelling. The porches clearly have been removed, but if we continue down to 91 Main Street, built in 1790, referred to as the Edwin Marshall House, this is where Daniel Putnam originally owned and operated his store before he moved up to the center of town. Along with operating his store out of this house, he also had a tavern and a coopersmith where they made barrels. Again, the history book makes a point of pointing out that there were scores of people employed here. The house was completely rebuilt in the late 1800s and can be seen here today. I think the barn on the left of the building is actually still intact, but the rest of the house has changed. Another building that is no longer with us, located at the intersection of Oak Ave and Northfield Road, Samuel Johnson's Tavern was destroyed by a fire in 1920, but opened in 1729. The book refers to it and says it was known far and near for over half a century as one of the most excellent accommodations in New England. So, also at the intersection of Oak Ave and Northfield Road was an airport seen here. Again, the Dickinson family, the ones who moved the Eagle House, built a landing strip in 1927. This photo was taken in 1932. But the Dickinsons were pioneers in air travel. They numbered their friends as James Doolittle and Charles Lindbergh. Arnold Dickinson, for some time, was the president of Sikorsky Aircraft Manufacturing Company in Connecticut, who were pioneers of helicopters. His father, Charles, built the house and also built the field as well as a house here, and also built Hickory Hills Lake. You can see in this photo approximately where the N in Northfield was his house, still standing there today. It's a big white house with a kind of glass solarium in the front that you can see, but it's kind of amazing that he had his private airport in the front yard, and the backyard you can almost see he clear cut all the way down to Hickory Hills so he could see his lake from his dining room. But also in the photo, that airport was kind of repurposed. The landing strips are actually Cushing Lane and Turkey Hill Road that exist there today. It's kind of tough to see in this setting, but in the photo you can see Holman Street running north and then Route 13 in the distance running up to Townsend. So these are some of the planes at his field, and a seaplane landed in Hickory Hills. Down the bottom of that seaplane, that's actually a big passenger compartment. You can see the windows in there where a number of people were sitting. And also, we had a Fitchburg and Leominster Street Railway running into the center of town from 1901 to 1925. The trolley came from Whalum Park and followed Leominster Road to the center of town and all the way to the end of Main Street, actually. Electric cars left the depot square in Fitchburg hourly at 20 past the hour and returned on the hour. There was also a little spur track that went from the intersection of Mass Ave and Main Street to the rear of the center store, so probably between Town Hall and the market. Each day an express car brought grain and provisions from Fitchburg to the market. And now this is my final slide here, just a aerial view of the town from 1948. You can see the town center to the left of the screen there, and Hickory Hills in the distance. School Street is all built out with the center school, the fire station, the high school. And the other high school, elementary school, middle school are not there. It's one big field. So now I guess I'll go back up to my seat up there and we can take questions, comments, or anything you want to share about the center of town. You're welcome to. So, you guys have anything you want to, that I missed? Got wrong?
It was good. Yep.
Excellent.
All right. Now, moving forward, as I mentioned, we're kind of reminiscing tonight, but a month from now, on July 30th, the planning board is going to hold another public outreach meeting that's going to be a little more involved, where we're going to talk about the future of the center of town and what we would all like to see there, how we can better utilize those town buildings that are there, get them, free up some capital revenue from the town that it takes to operate them year to year, and get them back, hopefully generating taxes for the center of town. And the idea is to bring some of that life back, some of those uses that are no longer there, that bring people to the center of town, get them to enjoy the space, and make it just more of a community environment that's good for everyone. And the idea is, we're not trying to completely commercially overhaul the center of town. The focus is appropriate development, and that's going to be the topic pretty much of our next meeting, that July 30th meeting, to talk about what's appropriate for the center of town. If there's no other comment or questions, I'd take a motion to adjourn our Historic Commission meeting.
Second it?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.